brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that supports life and family. 5% of your monthly plan price goes to your favorite charity. Buy the way you believe at CharityMobile.com and use promo code TRADITION. To say that Christianity is fragmented is to understate things rather dramatically. It goes without question that Christians today disagree about virtually everything, even sometimes the nature of Christ himself, with old heresies being now regurgitated by some self-professed Christians. And it's against the backdrop of increasing heresy, even among Catholics, that we have this weird proposal a few months ago, released by the Vatican, a study to look further into the question of changing the fundamental nature of the papacy to make it more appealing to Christians. A proposal that would essentially not require other Christians to change their theology at all, not require them to submit to the Bishop of Rome at all, and just see him as a sort of a first among equals, a honorary office kind of situation. It's not surprising that this document was issued at a time when synodality is all the talk. You see the same values in all this talk of synodal this and synodal that. We're all tired of synodality. And the same types of people in Rome who issued this new document on the papacy often refer to what we're going through now as the synodal church. They refer to it almost as a new religion, which would be accurate because it is a new religion. It bears very little resemblance to Catholicism. I know that's a dramatic statement for many to make, but they aren't hiding their intentions with this. They're very open about it. And against this backdrop, we have a statement from Bishop Eleganti that I read a couple of months ago on this channel, chastising the new proposal as essentially a way to further fragment Christianity and attempt to destroy the Catholic Church and replace it with something new. That letter got him a response from Cardinal Koch, who was one of the cardinals behind this papal proposal. Well, Bishop Eleganti has actually responded to that in the form of an interview, and he kind of just lays it all out there. What he talks about, what is going to happen if these people get their proposal, what the purpose behind it is, and how we should be ready for more of this nonsense. See, Eleganti describes the proposed document to fundamentally change the papacy to make it more acceptable to Christians who have separated themselves from Rome through heresy and schism. He describes it as a double truth, which maybe you can understand it as double speak. The proposal is based on a claim to unity. What it proposes is a claim to unity that denies reality, since you can only be united under the truth, and the Catholic Church makes certain truth claims about its origins. To not accept those claims means you cannot be united to the earthly head of the Church at all. That's core to this document. Again, these groups don't have to surrender their heresies, just recognize the Pope as some sort of figurehead. Bishop Eleganti describes in this interview this double truth in this way. Quote, "This double truth is one that only applies to the Western Church and one to the rest of Christendom. The Pope would then, as the Patriarch of the West, have the full jurisdictional power, defined at the First Vatican Council only over the Latin Church, but not over the Universal Church. I do not see the unity of the Church as a patchwork of different quote-unquote Christianities that practice loose coherence among themselves, but no real unity in essential questions of faith and sacramental or ecclesiastical practices. What would still be acceptable for the separated Christians with regard to the office of Peter cannot provide a criterion of truth for what Christ meant and wanted for this office. Since this is an infallibly defined truth, in my view it applies ecclesiologically to all baptized people. The Roman Catholic Church cannot give up on itself here by allowing this to be called into question out of love for the Christians it has separated. As I said, the Catholic Church cannot relativize an infallibly defined truth by overturning this dogma, which was formulated with the assistance of the Holy Spirit, in order to create a form of the Petrine office that would be acceptable to the Christians separated from it. Apart from that, the Roman Catholic Pope already has the primacy of honor among Christians anyway, due to his historically grown, broad, and globally respected authority and position of honor. This is simply an observable fact and also applies to the secular world. We don't need to argue about that anymore. It is the way it is, whether you like it or not." End quote. And when he talks about this global acceptance of the Pope, as if in symbolic terms, that does already exist. Except for some very strident Orthodox and very strident, mostly American Protestants, The Pope is looked upon even by many Protestants as a figurehead and as somebody to have some respect with. Maybe not this Pope, but in general, that's been the truth for a while. All you have to do is look to see some of the dialoguing, quote unquote, between the Catholic Church and like the Lutherans back in the 1990s to see that play out in action. But what's the point then if we already have that? Synodality at its core calls for unity. It's why we joke now when that Pope Francis, when he's not attacking traditional Catholics, just goes over unity over and over again. He wants unity, 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 and not just in the Catholic Church. He wants unity across the Church. It's why he made the sellout offer to the Anglicans. Conservative Anglicans who've never ordained women are being invited back to the Church and with the caveat that they do not have to give up their errors. Think about that for a second. They do not have to give up their heresies, their denials of the dogma, to be united with Rome. But you can't be united if you don't share the same truth, meaning you don't submit to the truth, because there are no competing truths. There's only something that is true or something that is false, and they're being allowed to cling to what is false. This is what we face here in the Catholic Church now. It's all part of the endgame of synodality, to relativize the truth, strip the papacy of much of its power, and put truth into the hands of the laity, which is how you can have quote-unquote unity between heretics and those who hold the true faith. By stripping the Church of all of its truth claims, embracing relativism, and allowing people to believe essentially what they want to believe, as long as they're united in some vague sense of friendship founded in dialogue. That's synodality. That's what it is. And Bishop Eleganti is against it. Quote, I view the synodal process critically. I see the danger that certain already established agendas will determine the synodal process and control it from the outset. That is not really listening. I believe that in such processes, the editors who formulate the final documents are the deciding factor, not necessarily the Holy Spirit. You cannot involve 1.2 billion Catholics in such a process. It will also immediately be instrumentalized for church politics. Today, the so-called reality of life is being used as a short circuit as another source of revelation. I like to quote Nicolas Gomez de Villa on this. Quote, after failing to get people to practice what it teaches, the present church has decided to teach what they practice. This applies to all the well-known hot topics. Yes, when the frustration of having failed once again with one's own agenda becomes great enough. Although Pope Francis has made synodality his flag, he has a very authoritarian leadership style. He intervenes in the synodal process and directs it, for example, by removing important questions from the General Assembly and delegating them to commissions that work autonomously. He also put a vote that had been rejected by the majority of the General Assembly back on the agenda for the Second Family Synod. The final document of the Amazon Synod disappointed Bishop Krautler for similar reasons. End quote. Those last two references to Bishop Krautler at the Amazon Synod and to the Synod on the Family, which resulted in Amoris Laetitia, those are references to how the people participating in that synod rejected changes to the faith that were then proposed in the final documents. He doesn't seem to care. Pope Francis does, really what the synodal outcome is. This whole thing is predetermined. That's why some observers, Tim Gordon, myself, and a couple of others, expect to have some kind of document about deaconesses, quote unquote, issued before the fall synod meets at the beginning of October. That's when it meets. So in the next 6 weeks or so, we might hear something from the Vatican on that. I'm curious what you have to say about this. Do you think that Bishop Eleganti is correct here? That essentially this decentralizing the power out of the papacy and placing it into the hands of the laity and then allowing people, heretical schismatic groups, to come back into the fold of the church without rebuking their own errors, without turning their backs on their errors and embracing the actual true faith. Do you see that as a selling out of Catholicism and as essentially a double speak and a misuse of concepts like the truth itself? You know, Bishop Eleganti was accused of essentially saying that the authors of that document were guilty of heresy, and it caused a firestorm when that happened. Do you think that's what he's saying? That those who push this are heresy, are guilty of heresy? Let me know what you think about that in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And, as always, pray for the church.
I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.